Let's talk just for a moment about potential sources of information. I talk about you get this data. So let's talk a moment about, well, where does the data come from? What's producing the data? Well, there's really not a lot of choices here. I have just 3 listed, and one of them is the data's coming directly from the larger consciousness system. Okay, now, what's the purpose of that? Why would the larger consciousness system send you data? As a teaching and learning tool. Okay. Important information, tests, nudging, trying to modify your attitude, expanding your experience. Perhaps the larger conscious system chooses an interface as a guide, a relative, a mentor, religious figure, a burning bush, a wall, a white stag, a bright white light, none of the above. The larger conscious system can be any of those things, communicating with you. Okay. And that kind of takes in everything. Evidently, the larger conscious system is everything. So that's catch-all. The other source of information is you. Now, the source with the larger conscious system, that's a low noise connection. That's why we like to go to point consciousness first, because when we're in point consciousness, we have a low noise connection. That's the definition of point consciousness. When you're in the void, nothing but awareness that you exist. That means you're not getting jabber and information and noise and all that stuff. It's just a calm, quiet, still, floating in the void. So that's a very high quality connection. You, when a noise or when the data comes from you, that's a high noise connection. And the reason you're getting that data from you is fear, beliefs, expectation, ego. It's because you're not in a point consciousness spot. You're in a spot where your mind is jabbering. Sometimes people call that monkey chatter or something. It's that part of you that doesn't let go and is still judging and deciding and analyzing and doing all that kind of stuff. That constant stream of consciousness voice that you've got. The third choice is it could be other beings. Now, those other beings could be 1 or 2 above. Could be the larger consciousness system as another being. Could be you, in other words, your imagination, as another being. Or it could just be an independent actor. Some other individuated unit of consciousness that's communicating with you. So those are basically the 3 choices. And often that other being will be the larger consciousness system. And your guide, for the most part, is just your personal interface to the larger consciousness system. So that guide isn't hovering over you necessarily like the pictures, Botticelli picture of the angel, hanging over your head all the time. That would be a very boring job, wouldn't it? Just following you around all day, waiting for a chance to give you, be asked a question and give you an answer. So that is the way it seems to us, because the interface is a constant interface. We get the same interface all the time. The interface can have a sense of humor. It can be consistent. It can be male or female. It can be anything. And it generally picks something that suits you. Okay. So, it can be Mary, or it could be a religious figure, or it could be an archangel, or it could be Buddha, or it could be Aunt Sadie, who was a relative of yours that you thought was very wise, who had passed away. So it could be any of those things. The larger conscious system wants to connect with you. They're going to connect with an interface that works for you. And it'll be consistent and sometimes have a wonderful sense of humor, just like Aunt Sadie did. It's got all the data. So it can do a really good impersonation of Aunt Sadie because it's got all the data that defines Aunt Sadie, you see. So often that's what we are talking about, and that's why these experiences that we have often have a message for us. And I don't mean a message like, we hear the message, but a message like there's something about the interaction that gives us an opportunity to learn something, to get something, to see a bigger picture. Well, that sounds like a setup, right? I mean, every time I talk to these beings, I get a little bigger insight, a little better understanding. Well, it's probably just not circumstance, or that just Aunt Sadie's just a really good teacher. It's the larger consciousness system trying to help you grow up, because your growth is its growth. So those are the sources of that information. And the one that, of course, is the least valuable is you, right? That's mostly fear, beliefs, expectations. You're saying things because they feel good, or it's what you want to hear, or because it's not what you want to hear, it scares you, or whatever your reason is. The quality, the value of what you experience in an out-of-body experience is strongly related to the quality of your intent to have the experience. Okay. So you have to think about what's your intent to have the experience. What you get back usually reflects the quality of your intent. So if what you intend to do is just go out exploring and have a good time, then what you get is pretty much a lot of scenery and have a good time. If your intent is to raise the quality of your consciousness, learn something important, gather some kind of understanding, help yourself grow up, then you'll get a different kind of thing altogether. If your intent is, whatever, what you get kind of matches that intent. It's matched to you. In other words, our learning has to be progressive. We don't start here and suddenly somebody tells us something, oh, now we know this much more. Our learning has to go by step by step by step. So until you've completed next step, you're not going to get the step after next. You see, so it depends on where you are and what you're ready for next, as far as what gets fed to you. Well, if you're really not ready for anything just now, you're just happy playing around having fun, then what you'll get is happy playing around having fun. You won't get much anything else back. So it has to be, what are you ready for? And not only what you think you're ready for. I'm ready for it all, Shoot me the whole wad, I want it all, I want it now, You might feel that way, but that's probably not the truth. And you'll get just one increment step in front of where you are now. And then you take the next. But often we'll kind of go looking for the big one, the final answer. But we're not ready for the final answer often. Because if we got the final answer, it wouldn't mean anything to us. We would miss it and we wouldn't even know it was the final answer. As far as we were concerned, it'd just be another pretty picture or something. It wouldn't connect with us. We wouldn't see it. It wouldn't be significant. So don't expect, and then a miracle happened. Expect just to learn something. But you have to be open for learning that something. If your intent is to learn something, your probability of learning something is much higher than if your intent is to do something else. See, so your intention is very important when you go into an out-of-body, and what you get out of that out-of-body as far as your own growth goes, and that really is important, not just having a cool experience. It depends on that intent. The system won't give you back what you don't intend. You have to want it. You have to, be open to it. Otherwise, it doesn't come to you. You're not being force-fed. So that's an important thing. All right, we'll do a little more of the, is it real? I'd like to say a little thing about proof. Maybe you don't, but I do. I always have these people that come up and say, well, where's your proof? How can you prove it? And when somebody says that, you know that they really don't understand. They don't, and they'll often say something, well, science requires proof. And, they even understand less than. Science does not require proof. The only things I know of that require proofs are logic and mathematics. And there are proofs in logic and proofs in mathematics, but those are very special things. What a proof is something that is logically consistent in those two fields. Okay, science has no requirement for proof. Science has a requirement for evidence. Okay, now what's the difference between proof and evidence? Evidence leaves room for uncertainty. Proof does not. And in science, there's always uncertainty. Back in the 1800s, late 1800s, when Newton produced his laws, or maybe he didn't call them laws, but somebody called them laws, they still were under the bad idea of thinking that was it. these were laws and will be this forevermore. Well, of course, it didn't turn out that way. Newton's laws turned out to be just an approximation and a little piece of reality. They didn't turn out to be laws at all. And since then, you'll notice that there are no laws. We don't have quantum mechanics laws. We don't have relativity laws. We have the theory of relativity and quantum mechanics theory. Now everything is theory, and what the difference is that theory says that perhaps, just perhaps, we don't know everything. There's things that we don't know yet. And this body of knowledge will change, will get bigger, or we'll find errors in it. And because we realize there's uncertainty in our being omniscient, although many physicists think they're omniscient, but they will relate if you push them hard enough that it's, they're not really omniscient. They leave room for uncertainty. Okay, that's evidence. What you need is evidence. So asking for proof is a silly thing. It's nearly impossible to prove anything. There is no proof other than a logic or mathematical proof. It's just really a consistency, is all proof is. If I ask you to prove to me how old you are, it's simple. Everybody knows how old they are. Prove it. How could you prove it? Well, you'd say, I'll go get my birth certificate. Birth certificates can be forged. Birth certificates can be wrong. Doctors can make mistakes when they write things down, put down the wrong day, the wrong time. How can you prove how old you are? You can't. You see? There is no proof. Well, you say, okay, that's a tough one, age, but what about, I know who my mother is. I can prove to you that this is the lady that's my mother. Go ask her. Well, how do you know the babies didn't get switched to the hospital? How do you know you weren't adopted and they just never told you and they don't want to tell you now? How do you know? You see, how can you prove it? You can't prove anything, much less something that is subjective, right, and personal. How can you prove that you're happy? Oh, well, look at me there. I'm smiling and laughing. Oh, you're just acting like you're happy. You see, how can you prove it? You can't prove anything that is subjective. But guess what? Everything, all of our experience is subjective. Okay? Because it's our experience. That means it's subjective. It's somebody else's experience, it's subjective to them. So all of our experience is subjective. We don't have anything but objective experience. Can't prove any of it. Even the basic things, Tell me where you live, and you may take me to a place, pull a key out, open the door. How do I know somebody didn't just lend you that key? Again, look for documents. How do I know they're real? You see, you can't prove anything. So all you need is evidence. That's all. Proof is, people who ask for proof are people who don't understand. They really don't understand, and they're not thinking. What they're trying to do is they're trying to either trap you or bully you into some kind of idea that, that something you can't produce. Well, of course you can't produce proof. Neither can anybody else on any subject, anywhere. Science can't produce any proof of anything, but they can produce evidence. You see, that's the difference. Let's see. Science requires good quality, consistent evidence. And who uses the word proof a lot? Lawyers, right? True believers, closed-minded skeptics, demagogues. Those are the people that use the word proof, other than mathematicians and people doing logic puzzles. But nobody else really uses that word. It doesn't apply to anything. Okay, the way science works now is that you end up with a statement, one of two statements. One of them is, my conclusion is correct, let's put it this way, that my conclusion could be wrong is 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000. So we do an assessment of error in an experiment. So all science is reported with error bars. This is what I think it is, but it could be as much as that, it could be as less as that, and this assessment of the error is the bounds around which you have the problem. Okay, so there's always error. Or if it's an experiment that is statistics, then you need statistical significance, which boils down to the same thing. What's the probability that my answer could have just happened randomly. It's not the real answer, it just happened. Well, there's a statistical test you can do, and you say you get statistical significance when the probability of it being just a random occurrence is less than 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000. If you get an answer that's 1 in 100, that's like interesting. If you get 1 in 1,000, that's good. That's considered good science. If you get 1 in 10,000, that's a fact. That's the way science generally looks at it. So then you'd think that anything that would have credibility of being real, of greater than, say, 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000, would really be considered pretty much a fact. That it's very unlikely that it's wrong, or that you just got that by accident. You went out of body and you got some information and it turned out that it was just right. Well, what's the probability that you just got that accidentally, that it was random, instead of you actually getting the information from the source? Okay, then you give a probability of that. Well, in that case, most all of the remote viewing that's done that successfully hits its target is way into that science routine, right? Way into the credibility, statistically, as science. But is it accepted as science? No. Why not? Because it flies in the face of scientific belief. Yes, scientists are believers. The scientists are the high priests of our society, Western society, pretty much today. But by high priests, what's that mean? They're the ones that tell us what to believe and what not to believe, what's true and what's not. So it used to be the priests did that, and now it's the scientists do that. They're the high priests of our culture. And they determine what's right and what's wrong, and they have a belief system, just like the old high priest did. And if what you come up with runs afoul of that belief system, then it's wrong. And it's obviously not science, you see. So that's what happens. And a good demonstration for that is at PAIR Labs. PAIR is an acronym, PEAR, Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research. Okay, it's a bunch of physicists and engineers, all with doctorate degrees, all have been working. PAIR Labs has been working for like 25, 30 years. It's not a new thing. And they do investigations into mind-changing matter. Okay? So they use mind, they use intent to modify what physically happens. Been doing it for years. Top-notch scientific protocols. Because they knew they were working in an area that was not within the belief system of science. So they made triply sure that they understood their errors. They understood their mathematics and their statistics. So their scientific protocols are much more stringent than most anybody else would have. And if you go to their website, just go up to www.pair, or you maybe have to go to Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research. But you go to their website and you'll get a little video that you can play. And he'll give you a little tour, basically, of what they've done and what the results are. And he says that if we take all of our experiments together as an ensemble, and we look at what's the probability that we could have gotten these answers randomly. It's just, we just happened to get the right answer, but it was just luck. It's less than 1 in a billion. That's, 4 orders of magnitude more than what is fact in science elsewhere. And guess what else? PAIR Labs, Princeton Engineering and Physics can't get it published in scientific mainstream journals. Now see, if they can't succeed in this environment, you see the problem. So it's a belief problem, just like it was when the other high priests, 500 years ago were in charge. It was the same problem. So that's the problem that's kind of the problem you have. So evidence is not really enough, you see, to be scientific. Now it would be, I guess, in an honest world where the high priests weren't in charge. But in this world, there are beliefs, and scientists have beliefs just like other people have beliefs. And they have fears, and they have ego, and they have, expectations and all the rest of it. And this is part of it. So, 1, proof is not necessary. It doesn't exist anywhere. 2, you need to convince yourself that it's true, and you need to be rigorous in that. You don't want to wander down, la-la lane because you think that would be cool. You need to be rigorous in collecting your own evidence. But it's your evidence, and you don't really have to prove anything to anybody else. If the evidence satisfies you that this is, that what you're doing is valuable to you, so you won't even say real anymore, because we've kind of dealt with that. If it's valuable to you, if you're learning from it, you don't need any more justification than that. That's just about all the justification you need. Evidence is your evidence. It's your time and energy, and you don't want to be fooling yourself either, right? So let you be the judge of what you're going to spend your time on. So this idea about give me proof, it's a silly idea, only asked by people who don't understand. And this idea about, well, if there was evidence, everybody would believe it. It must not be right because there isn't any evidence. There's lots and lots of evidence. There's been evidence that's been good quality evidence for hundreds of years. Paralabs is just an example. Science and engineering don't get a whole lot better than Princeton, so that's the whole thing. No, evidence wouldn't, clearly everybody would agree, that it was right. So neither of those are really very important in the larger world. You're not going to convince anybody by giving them evidence. All you can do is help encourage them to get experience. If it's not their experience, it's not their truth. And until the high priests change their mind on this subject, then the official answer is it doesn't exist and it isn't real. Well, most of you guys know better, and that really shouldn't disturb you. You go on anyway, because we're not going to limit ourselves based on the decree from the high priests. We're the Galileos, we're the Newtons, the people who are kind of going beyond where the priests have led us. Okay, let's see. There's lots of information available within the out-of-body communities, the remote viewing communities. People have been doing a lot of remote viewing experiments ever since it came out. Joe McMoneagle and others about how the CIA has been using remote viewing and so on. It got a lot of press. A lot of people became aware of it. There's research going on in a dozen different places. So there's lots of evidence there. You can get them on the web. You Google remote viewing, you'll find lots and lots of stuff, and you can narrow your search down to where you get research houses. Basically, they're doing real research on it with real good protocols. There's, I would send you to some of the old data. The data that I first was aware of was back in the 1970s, late 60s, where Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ, physicists from Stanford University, started a study of remote viewing. And then they did some tests with Uri Geller and other things, and it's floating around on the internet in video, if you can find it. It's, they published in the IEEE journal. So that was peer reviewed and published because their protocols were very sound. You couldn't, the referees couldn't find anything really wrong with what they were doing, and the fact that it was not the official belief line, they went ahead and published it anyway. Engineers sometimes tend to be a little more open-minded about physics than physicists do because it's not their dog in the fight, right? So anyway, you could start there. I mean, that goes back, into the late 60s where this research was going on. And before that, it was being done at Duke University, right? The Ryan Institute. Ryan, yeah. Is that right? Ryan Institute, Duke. And there are lots of experiments. That experimentation went on for 30 years or so. Yeah. So there's lots of proof, lots of evidence. Anybody who comes and says, I want to see some evidence, tell them to go research some of this stuff. Tell them to go read a couple of Dean Radin's books. Dean Radin talks about evidence. You see, and he does a lot of experiments and reports results and so on. So anybody that wants evidence can find it. Most of the people claiming that they want to see evidence don't really want any evidence. They don't want to really make an effort to go find it. If you tell them where it's where it is and where to go look, they're not going to read it, because that's not really what they're looking for. Now, sometimes they are, and when they are, they'll go find it, and in that case, they'll come back and say, gee, thanks, I didn't realize all of that. But often that's not the case. But then that's their problem, right? They will have to deal with that themselves. All right. Sometimes there can be no evidence. Now, I told you all before that get evidence, convince yourself, that's important. You need to know whether what you're doing is real or not. And that means you have to do something that relates to the physical, because that's how we define truth, is by this virtual reality that we live in. Yeah, that doesn't make any logical sense either, but that's what we do. So convince yourself that what you're seeing in these non-physical realities correlate with what you're getting in this reality. The two reality frames correlate with each other. But then when you go outside of interacting with this reality, then where's the proof? Well, there can't be any proof. If you go out and you talk to a little man with three heads and, whatever, and he gives you information, how you can prove, or, there is no proof anyway, but what's that evidence of? Too many drugs, bad hallucination, what's that evidence of? Well, it's not evident of anything. You just got information. There's not going to be any evidence of it. So, is the information useful? See, we're back to that same thing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether he had three heads or one head, or whether it was a talking, burning bush. It really doesn't matter. Is it useful to you? It's the only thing that matters in that case. Consider that inside data, we're talking about the outside and inside data. Consider inside data that is not limited by intellect, fear, ego, and belief. Is that any different than outside data? No. So you see your inside data, let's not believe that, that's inside data. The outside data, that's the real stuff. Once you eliminate the fear and the belief and the ego and the expectations, there isn't any difference between inside and outside data. You see, the only reason you have a subconscious, the only reason you have areas of yourself that you're not aware of in your subconscious is because of the fear and the belief and the ego. That's where that comes from. Once you get rid of that stuff, you become aware, period. You're not walking around with the subconscious, with things that you aren't aware of boiling around inside your body, making you do this and that, or forcing you, I shouldn't say forcing, but I put all that in quotes, it's a metaphor, kind of pushing you this way and that. It's gone. So the inside data and the outside data all become one thing because you live in the larger reality. You see, it's getting rid of the fear and the ego and the beliefs and the expectations. It's just data. It's just you and the larger consciousness system, and it's data and other individuated units of consciousness. Okay. And what matters is whether it's helpful or not. That's the key. Is it useful to your evolution? That's the important question. Okay, so the rule is open-minded skepticism, right? Open-minded skepticism. If you keep that, then you can't go wrong. You will eventually get to the right answer. So you need to be open-minded and you need to be skeptical. So be open to everything. Believe nothing. Because belief is the enemy. We don't want to believe anything. You either know it as a fact because it's your experience, so it's your truth, or it's a possibility. And you can give it a probability. I give that 1 in 1,000. Or I give that a 0.99. But there should be very few things that end up with a 1 or a 0 in the probability. Most everything should be, the things that you really, really think are sound, maybe those are 0.9999s. And the things you really think are not sound, maybe those are, 1 in a million or something. But there should be just a few 1s and 0s, not very many. Everything else can just stay, maybe. I think so. I don't think so. And let it go with that. Now, most people have a hard time with that. They can't do that. It's like, tell me, I want to know, is it right or is it wrong? Well, what they're looking for is a belief. They're saying, uncertainty bothers me. Uncertainty frightens me. I want to know. I don't want to be uncertain. And they'd rather have a belief than be uncertain. So they make something up and believe it. Or they listen to somebody else, what someone else says, or somebody else's priest, or whatever, and then they have a belief. So belief is the enemy. You don't want the belief because a belief limits you. If you believe it, you're no longer open for it to be any different. It's done. You don't have to visit that anymore. You don't have to collect any more data. You're done with it. It's a belief. That's the problem with a belief. Instead, you assess the potential of the data to be useful to your growth process. That's what you're doing, and that's what you're doing in this out-of-body state too. Because just having fun is fun for a while. I think Bob Monroe said that in one of his things. And somebody said, well, you spend a lot of time flying around the mountains like you used to. And he said, well, believe it or not, after a while that gets boring. And it does. You can fool around, and it's fun to, you get into a new reality frame, and you want to explore, and you want to do things that are fun, but you can't just do things that are fun, and do things that are fun, and do things that are fun. It gets old, and it doesn't get you anywhere, and it's just wasting your time eventually. But I would say, don't avoid doing things that are fun, go do them. But realize there's more to it than that, and that eventually you ought to get something out of it that's useful to you. And if not, your intent isn't right. You need to intend to get something useful out of it. You see, and if that's the case and you're open, you'll get something out of it, because the larger consciousness system will come and give you lessons right in your face. It'll hit you right between the eyes with a 2-by-4 and says, wake up. Here's what's going on. Watch this. And you'll get these kinds of wake-up calls, because if you're open and ready, it will be there to help you learn. So you don't have to do it all by yourself. All right. Having trouble. You're having trouble getting out of body. Well, there's quite a few reasons. Mostly it's the same old stuff, right? Ego, beliefs, expectations, right? That's the same old thing. But a lot of times in the beginning, those beliefs and ego and expectations show up as various kinds of things. And these things, as you let go of those beliefs and expectations, they kind of go away. And you don't have them anymore. None of them are logically necessary. I don't want to call them nonsense. It's just like before. The tools aren't nonsense. They're just things that you need to be signposts for you. But it's all this stuff, the paralysis, the violent oscillations, the electric shocks, the loud noises, the menacing voices, the beams that show up and smack you, all that stuff is mostly smoke and mirrors. And it's smoke and mirrors, it's external fear tests, the larger system wanting to see whether or not you're actually ready to get into the out-of-body state. Should it encourage you or should it discourage you? Because if it encourages you and you're not ready, it's going to be worse. You're going to run into such a bad situation and have such a bad time with it that you'll stop trying. At least now you're trying, and it doesn't want to spoil that. So it wants to make sure that your trip isn't too bad. A little scary maybe, but so there is a kind of a fear filter at the beginning. If you're too fearful, you'll get that right in the beginning. A monster will jump out, and go boo. Or this big hand will come up and go, like it's going to, death. The death hand will reach up for you. And if you're fearful, then that's the end of it. You go away. So some of it is tests, some of those oscillations, and they get very violent. Some people hear loud noises and explosions, and it scares them. Or the paralysis frightens them. Oh no, what am I going to do now? The boogeyman could bit me and I couldn't run away. I'm paralyzed. And they panic. They don't belong there yet. They're not ready. See? So these things are things that you go through. And some of them are not fear tests. Some of them are just signposts. Well, now you get just this nice little pleasant oscillation. It just kind of feels good to let you know it's a signpost. Okay, you're there. This is where it gets profitable for you. So why do you get that signpost? Because that's what it means to you. See? And other people told you. Why did you see that cord? Because other people told you about the cord and it made sense to you, because here you were out of the body, attached to your body, and neither one could survive without the other, et cetera, et cetera. So the cord kind of made a good metaphor for you. Well, those oscillations make good metaphors, and we spread them all around. And it's a good tool for telling you that you're you're at that place in your mind with your intent that's productive. Once you feel that 4 hertz oscillation going on, then it's a good spot to be in. From there on, you can heal, you can go out of body, you can do lots of things. That point consciousness, that can be another one. And suddenly you find yourself floating in the void. It's a good sign. You see, go from there. These are signposts, and we make these tools because they're helpful to us. Are they necessary? Are they logically required? No, they're not logically required, and the longer you do this, the less you'll use them. At first, it was always these big oscillations. You see, at first, it was always these big things because you weren't too sensitive yet, and you kind of had to put it pushed right in your face for you to get it. And then it was, does it scare you? Once you got past the point that, no, it doesn't scare me, I'm just going to go with it. I don't care what happens. I'm going to do this thing. Well, then it fades into something else. You see, you don't need that anymore. So the loud noises, the boogeyman, the people getting after you and all that kind of thing, that's partly, remember I said the ways you get your data? One of the biggest one is the larger conscious system gives you the data. Okay, that's your interaction with the larger conscious system. So none of those things are there, but they're experiences that will help you not go there if you're not ready, and they will dissipate as you become ready. Tools. Okay. Now, when we were at Monroe's, we put electrodes on people and brainwaves on people, and we could see them vibrate. You actually were physically doing that. Skin resistance was vibrating at 4 hertz. So something's physical is going on, but that doesn't, when I say they're a tool and they're in your mind, it's not necessarily that it's not in your body. Your body isn't really a physical body. See, it's all consciousness. So making a little needle vibrate, something I guess we needed at the time. So, we got that. And you get physical things as well. So the ego is another thing. If it's just a cool experience that you want to have, bragging rights, a carnival ride, any intent other than learning, growing up, and improving the quality of your consciousness, then it will limit you. It's not necessarily bad. It just limits you. Power, gathering interest or information on other people. Okay, if that's your motivation, that will limit you. And you'll find that as soon as you start getting access and you start having these experiences, all that stuff just goes away. Todd told us an example of that. His motivation was to find out if these conspiracies were really going on, you see, but very shortly after you get there, that's no longer important anymore, so you let that go. So you see, if he hadn't let it go, that would have been a limitation. He'd have been stuck there in that space and he wouldn't learn half of what he's learned since then. You see, so these things are just, you get stuck in these. Here you go, let's see, beliefs. Again, that the big problem people have is they think it's body-centered. So they do all these body things. They climb up ropes out of their body, they roll out of their body, they sit up out of their body, they look at their out-of-body arm. All of it's body-related, okay? And people who are very left brain often have problems with that. It's not productive for them to be so body-centered. Why do we believe that? Well, because that's what people write in books. That's the techniques, so it all centers around the body, but the body's not it. But if you believe it is, then you're kind of stuck with this dichotomy of body and the out-of-body body and the in-body body, and the two of them having to separate from each other, and the separation process. So now here you are focused on a separation process that doesn't exist. You see? There is no separation process. There is no physical body. It's just you, consciousness. But if you focus on the separation process as the key, for some people, that's good. It pops them right, all right, Bob, roll out of body, you see? But for a lot of people, that's a hang-up. You get hung on that separation process. Let's do this, and you look at it to see, is that it? Is my other arm there? And you test. Well, that's because it puts you in a point where you're checking, you're analyzing. It gives you a thing to check and analyze. Well, that gets you back to your intellect. Now you're trying to raise an arm and squint at it with your eyeball to check to see if it's right, you see? That inhibits your process. You can't do it that way. So people who have problems with this body-centered view are people who want the test. they want to make a test right away to see whether it's real. Well, if you start testing its reality, it's never going to be real because you'll never get there, because continually testing and analyzing will prevent it from ever happening. You see, the people who succeed with that thing of rolling out of the body-centered things are the people who just go with it. They just do it and go with it, and they don't test it until after it's done. You see, then they look back, or then they do something, but they don't test while the process is going on. So that's the difference between the people who can succeed with this body metaphor, if you will, as a tool, and those who can't. So if you're one of those that's struggling with that and can't get it down, it's because you immediately test. Is this it? All right, I'm getting a sensation. Am I out of body now? Look, and now I can't get loose. You see, and you do all that, that'll prevent you from ever getting there. See what I mean? See how it's counterproductive sometimes? But for somebody who says, oh, I'll just go on up this rope, and then once I get it to the top, I'll do something else, and then I'll look down at my body. Now they're not trying to interact with the process. It might be successful for them, because they're going through the whole process. So those are the beliefs. Expectations are a problem because of the books we read, because of the descriptions we get, because of the tools we use. All those things give us expectations. When somebody says, well, raise your arm and look if it's your out-of-body arm. Well, now you've got an expectation. And if that expectation doesn't work, if you raise your arm and it's not your out-of-body arm, then you're wrong. You just haven't done it, right? That deflates you back to zero, doesn't it? That maybe will keep you deflated for the next week, you see? So we have all these expectations, and if we don't happen to have that same connection so that tool focuses our intent in the way it does for the people who succeed with that technique, then the technique becomes a problem. See what I mean? It becomes a problem for you. Now that's kind of an anti-technique for you. That keeps you from going out of body because you have an expectation. And then when you do get out of body, you want to have Bob Monroe's experience, right? You want to go to this locale, another locale, and you have to understand that Bob's experience was Bob's metaphor for Bob's experience. Bob was a good explorer, and he reported very accurately what his experience was, but it was his personal, subjective experience. So when he said, well, when he has a question, what happens is you pose, whether you intend to or not, you pose these questions in your mind. So Bob has a question like, what happens to all the souls who get lost and don't know what they're doing and are fear or bound up to religions or something like that? So he asked that question. Just because it's a question of his, And what does he get? He gets a picture. He gets a metaphor. He gets something that will make sense to him because of who he is and his background. So then he sees this swirl of people just kind of going in a non-ending ring around whatever, and he calls, that's the place of lost dead souls, or the people who are religious and can't let go, or whatever. And you see, that's his metaphor. Now, if you go out of body and can't find that place, it's not because you're lost and you have poor directions. Is that metaphor? Isn't necessarily your metaphor. Maybe you don't have that question or you're not interested, but whatever you want to know about and you have that intent, that's what you'll get. If your mind's blank, you'll get nothing. If your mind's jumping around, you'll get a hodgepodge of junk. If it's focused and you know exactly what you're thinking when you're thinking it, which you can only do that when it's low noise, you'll get information back, and it'll be pictures, and it'll be sounds, and it's a multimedia show, and they're all metaphors. Don't look at what you saw, look at what it means. That's the important part. Okay, so you let the expectation go. Don't have an expectation. Your experience is your experience, period. And you can grow from it or not, period. Nothing else matters. You see, let the rest of it go. It doesn't have to be like anybody else's experience. You don't need to see the silver cord or whatever. You see, but you need to have experiences that are useful, and the only way they're going to be useful is if you want them to be useful. Because it's your intent is the leader. It's the motive force. It's what makes consciousness work. It's intention. It's what moves data. And most of us go into the out-of-body state or go into our meditation, and we don't really have any intention. So our intention's kind of blank. And what happens when it's blank? It jumps around. It's not really blank. you'll have this idea shoot through your mind, that idea shoot through your mind, and when one of those ideas shoot through your mind, that's an intention. You get that data back. But it only lasts for half a second, and then something else happens. That only lasts for half a second, and the whole thing doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you because you haven't made a whole lot of sense to it. You see? That's something to work on. All right. Also, we have a problem with people who do what Monroe Institute calls click out. A click out means that you sit in your booth and you put on your headphones and you get this guided imagery and you're following along with it just right until you're supposed to do something, until you're supposed to go somewhere or see something, not just listen to the relaxation exercise. And as soon as you get to that, you're gone. You lose consciousness. And then the exercise is over, and as they're coming back, you regain consciousness and you're awake again. What's going on there? Why do these people click out? Well, there's lots of reasons, but the biggest reason is that you're probably very left brain. And why you're clicking out is because of fear. What's the fear? It's the fear that you'll just be kidding yourself and it won't be real. That frightens you so much that, okay, it's going to lead you. You're listening to this thing, you're listening to it, and it says, now, see the being in front of you, and you just can't stand the thought that you might make that being up in front of you, and it wouldn't be real, and that puts up such a conflict in your system that you're gone. You turn off because you can't deal with the stress of not knowing whether you're making it up or it's outside of you. And there's no way to tell, you see? Whereas the right brain people, they don't care. Inside of me, outside of me, alongside of me, who cares, I see the image, I interact with the image, I get what I get from it. It's good or bad, I learn, I don't learn. They take things holistically. They're not breaking it up into little chunks that, have to be proven to yourself. They don't tend to have any problem with those things. They follow that along. So part of that click out is just the fear of being wrong, fear of thinking that it's outside data when it's inside data. Well, you won't know. When something talks to you, you have no idea whether you're talking to yourself or not for a while. Stop judging. Stop analyzing. Stop being so critical. Give it a chance. 3 months later, 50 hours of conversation, make a judgment. But your main judgment at that point, your secondary judgment is, was it outside of me? Your main judgment is, was it useful? If it's not useful, don't bother anymore. Doesn't matter if it's inside or outside. But you can tell whether it's inside or outside by that much time. If you try to judge too early, you'll just turn it off. It won't happen. Just like the out of body. You try to look at your arm too early, you just turn it off. Okay? You have to just go with it. I don't care whether I'm making it up or not. I don't care whether it's real or not. Let me just go experience it, and I'll be able to judge later after I've collected a lot more data whether it's real or not. But on the first 10 seconds of data, I want to make a judgment of whether it's real or not. You see? That inhibits you. You'll never get there. You have to say, I'm going to go with this thing. I'm going to work it out of body for the next 2 years, or whatever. And I'll just go with whatever happens. I'll follow it. Something scary happens. I see a big hand or something. I'll go shake it. I'll just do whatever. And then I'll come to grips with it later and see what I think about it. See what I mean? This is skepticism, but it's open-minded. So stay skeptical, stay open-minded. Say, well, maybe it's real, maybe it's not. But I don't have enough information yet. That's like sitting down with a violin. Somebody gives you a violin, you sit down with it for 5 minutes and you can't make it play music. So you throw the thing away and say, damn thing doesn't work. You got to give it time. It doesn't work. And you can't make those judgments right away. All right. So you cannot give credibility to everything you see or hear or take all at face value. Sometimes you're being set up to learn something useful. And that may be in the form of unpleasant feedback. So you have to look at the bigger picture and always look for, how can this experience help me grow? I can give you an example. One time I kept getting this repeat experience. I'd be out of body and I'd get into this experience where I'd be put in a situation where nothing I could do would work. Okay, I'd be put in a situation sort of like a short order cook that has too many orders, and they just can't, you're there by yourself and you've got 50 eggs to flip, 100 burgers to turn over before they burn, and you just can't do it fast enough. And when you get fast enough, then you get twice as many orders, you see? And it's just a frustration thing. Sometimes people have dreams like that too, where you just have these frustration dreams and you just can't get to where you have to get to. And what was the lesson? I probably went through this thing 10 times. First lesson I thought is, well, I will use my mind to flip those burgers and things. I gave up with the physical process. I couldn't move fast enough. So then I say, well, I'll just get the implements to move and be fast enough. Well, that got to where that was a blur and I couldn't keep up. And I finally got it. The solution was just to create the end product. That was easy. And you just create it. Somebody orders something, they got it on their plate in front of them, you see. You don't have to go through, and what was the lesson? You don't have to go through the physical process. The key isn't in the physical process. It's not that you got to do this, you got to flip the burgers so they'll get burned on one side, you got to do all this process is unnecessary. You see, that was what the lesson was for me, to let go of my physics brain, you see, and go more through the right brain and see it as a whole thing. Just deal with the problem as it is, as a whole, not try to, work your way up and force it to be the way you want it to be because of the stuff you do. Just deal at the level of creation at the problem. And of course the same is for you when you're trying to get rid of your fears and things. If you try a lot of processes, mostly they don't work. You got to deal with it at the root, at where it is, rather than try to do all these little things that are supposed to help, mostly don't. So that was a lesson of mine, and it took a long time for me to get it. So the point is, don't say that there's something wrong or I can't do this. I just, these people aren't fair. I go faster and faster and faster, and I never can keep up. Well, it may not be that you need somehow to go faster, but that you need to step back and see the bigger picture. Maybe what's going on there. Oh, I'm on the very last page already. That's good.
And your time is up.
Well, give me a few seconds. Out of body, it's my timekeeping. Out of body may help you become detached. It may help you become fearless. It may help you become egoless, because in the out of body state is where your fear and ego and attachment just come right out at you in real life. So it's a wonderful place to learn to let go of these things. So is the dream reality. In these two realities, you are acting out of the being level. In this reality, you're acting out of the intellect a lot. You act how you think you should be. Do what you think you should do. There, you just are. Okay, the way you interact. If a boogeyman jumps out and goes boo, if you're frightened, if you have fear inside, you'll be terrified. Intellectually, you can't say, well, I know it's just a boogeyman and it's not going to hurt me. I'm not going to run away. You see, that generally doesn't work in those reality frames, dream reality frames. A little more will work in the out of body because you do have some of that intellect along with you. But mostly, these are good learning frames. And you should use it as that. Always be skeptical. Don't rush the evidence process. And see everything as a test and as a challenge to learn. Let go of the idea of a cool carnival ride and let go of the gee whiz. Think of out of body as just another schoolhouse and realize that you will learn more if you have good questions, good intents, and focus on learning things that are important. Okay? So look for ways to learn. Grow your big picture understanding and the quality of your consciousness from every experience you have, whether it's out of body, whether it's in a dream world, or whether it's here. Same advice. If you can do this, then the larger consciousness system will see you as ready, and the system will begin in earnest to teach you. I'm done.